And good afternoon. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed. My name is Matt Delvecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing, and the senior living industry. Coming up on the show, the tragic story of teenager Riley Fairholm, who was shot and killed by police on a summer night in Rawdon in 2018. A public coroner's inquiry was ordered and recently made public. We're going to hear from Riley's mother, Tracy Wing, about this unimaginable tragedy. And on the second half of the show, a magical story about an elderly woman's last wishes, and it has a titanic twist that you're not going to want to miss. And in the last segment, I'll be taking your calls and texts to respond to your questions about caregiving and elder care planning as we age. Thank you for joining me on Life Unrehearsed. I hope you're enjoying this lovely Saturday afternoon. I want to talk about this tragic story of Riley Fairholm, and it really hits home with me personally, as I know Riley's dad, Larry Fairholm, and I have come to know his mom, Tracy Wing, who has been on Life Unrehearsed with me a couple of times since Riley's death. In fact, it was on July 25th, 2018, Riley Fairholm, at the age of 17 years old, was in distress. He was living in Brome Lake. It was late at night on an industrial road, and SQ officers were called in. Riley had a BB gun. He was not in a good mental state, and some would say this was a cry for help. Well, just 61 seconds after the arrival of the first SQ officer, Riley was shot in the head from 100 feet away, and he died. A public inquiry was ordered after Coroner Jeanne Kamel presided over the inquiry, and the report was made public a few months ago. We have Riley's mom, Tracy Wing, on the line. Tracy, welcome back to Life Unrehearsed.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
Tracy, again, sorry for your loss, and thank you for coming back on the show. I know this has been extremely difficult for you and Riley's dad, Larry, and your entire family, and I certainly appreciate your courage and openness to talk about this. So, Tracy, can you bring us back to July 25th, 2018, when you received a text from your son in the middle of the night? Can you describe what happened?
Yes, my son, he sent me a text message. It was about 1:44 in the morning, and it was just a simple, I love you. And it was a bit of a code for me, like to have random texts like that at night that he wasn't well. So I went to check up on him in his room, and he wasn't there. So I just took it upon myself to go look for him. And about 15 minutes later, I drove up onto a scene, and I did not know the circumstances of how Riley had died, but I was kind of informed that it was Riley that had died there, and then we went to the hospital, and it's been kind of a whirlwind since then.
I can't possibly imagine as a mother and in the middle of the night in the hospital, you just really don't know what's going on. And as it turns out, this made national news. Something was just not right, Tracy. Someone cannot be in distress and shot dead just 61 seconds after the arrival of police officers. And you fought, Tracy, for years and years. And finally, they announced a coroner's inquest. Can you bring us through that process?
Yes, well, when that night on the 25th, when we arrived at the hospital, right away, because it took them an hour and a half to let us know that they were the ones that had shot him, that the SQ had shot him. And I always assumed that it had been, because they said they tried to negotiate with them. And after the weeks and days following his death, nothing sat right with me. I kept finding things out, and the way I was finding things out was that I had to make access of information towards the different institutions, whether it was the hospital, the BEI, the Bureau des Enquêtes Indépendantes, or even the SQ. And the information that I was getting was really trickling in. And so, I said, well, there was no dash cams like you see on the States, that the very next day everything's out there. So I decided I'd try making a petition to have SQ have body cams, and then I was invited to go to the National Assembly, and I was able to speak. And it was for coroner's change of laws, and a couple of days after that, the coroner in chief invited me to, or said that she was going to ask or mandate public inquiry, and it took 4 years,
Mm.
just about 4 years, in order for me to get the truth. If you wish, to hear the police officers testify, to see them, to hear really what had happened, and it just validated a lot of the feelings that I had.
You're listening to Life Unrehearsed with Matt Delvecchio, and we're talking to Tracy Wing, the mother of Riley Fairholm. And Riley was shot and killed by police on a summer night in 2018 while in distress. And a coroner's public inquiry took place, and the results were made public just a few months ago. And, good on you, Tracy, for fighting for this. What were some of the major conclusions of the coroner's inquest?
Well, the biggest one of the biggest conclusions was that it wasn't a suicide by cop. Another major thing that came out was that there was no negotiations. Riley had 61 seconds. The police officer who was supposedly communicating with Riley had his door closed. And so even if he was perhaps giving orders, no one heard what Riley was saying, except for one phrase, which the coroner also thought was suspect, that they all knew the same thing. The intervention itself, it just was a bad intervention. They didn't follow the way that they were hoping it was going to go through. So it was just all of those things that I had just felt in my heart. And another thing was that Riley had some difficulties in high school, and he wasn't heard there. He had a zero tolerance policy where Riley was concerned that if Riley acted up in class, he was just sent home, kind of forgotten about. So that all came out, and those things are important to me because those are things that I knew had happened, and it was a way to not just blame Riley, because there was a lot of victim blaming.
A lot of victim blaming, and this whole concept of suicide by cop. And yes, he was in distress, and in a way, as difficult as this must have been, Tracy, I'm sure it was validating for you, because these were suspicions that you had to fight for. It took way too long. Coroner Kamel wrote that despite being seen by several healthcare professionals and prescribed appropriate medication, follow-up and sustained support was lacking. If a child needs a village to support him in his difficulties, Riley, and dare I say his parents, have been left alone, she said. It is not enough to assess and medicate a person to ensure safe follow-up. What do you say to those comments of Coroner Kamel?
I would agree with that most of the time, but I just want to be clear that Riley was prescribed medication, but Riley just didn't want to take the medication. And I do want to emphasize that in Quebec, if you're 14 years old, a doctor can't make you go see a doctor. A psychologist can't make you go see a psychologist. I tried real hard. I think what's lacking is that the kids don't believe in them. There's a lack of understanding in young people that the help is there, that they're not being judged. But so, yeah, it takes a village, but I think the lack of communication came from many different spheres, and I think Riley got the medical attention that he was, seeking, really. So, but I know the services aren't always out there, and especially now after the pandemic, we see there's crises everywhere, and there's just a lack of understanding, and maybe the kid can't get to the doctor, but there's a lot of places that they're going, and I think they're reaching out before that it has to get there, and that we just have to put our ears on, and we have to really listen to these kids, to stop and to just listen.
You're so right, Tracy. In fact, we have to head out to traffic. We're going to, you've been through so much, but you could offer so much advice to parents who may have children in distress. And let's face it, post-pandemic, it's very, very common. And we want your words of advice of that. And we also want to hear about some of the recommendations that came out of this coroner's inquest. And we think there were some good recommendations. And welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Matt Delvecchio, and we're talking to Tracy Wing, the mother of Riley Fairholm. And Riley was shot and killed by police on a summer night in 2018 while he was in distress. A coroner's public inquiry took place, and the results were made public just a few months ago. We have Tracy, the mom, on the line again. Tracy, thank you for coming on to Life Unrehearsed, and this is not easy for you, and we do appreciate you sharing your thoughts, and you have helped many, many families. And even just the fact that they did this inquiry, the recommendations, Tracy, again, must have been also, in one way, if there's a silver lining, there were 6 or 7 of them, and really due to your efforts, these recommendations were there. Can you share some of the more important recommendations that were brought out in the coroner's inquest?
Yeah, the biggest one, in my opinion, is that they are going to implement more psychological training, I guess, in a way of how to intervene with people that are having a mental crisis. It is really difficult for us to put all that on the police officers. They're police officers first. They're not psychologists. So I think that there's a mandate out there, or there's a recommendation. It's not mandated that they add this to the curriculum. As far as I know, it was added into the spring curriculum of more of a communication type of class, which is really, really important, because there is a way to communicate with people who are in a crisis, and it's usually not by barking out orders. So the only thing that I would like to stress again on that is that they're just recommendations. Every year or every couple of years, there's many coroner's inquests in regards to police activity and death, whether they're in custody or not. And there's never any follow-up to these recommendations. So that's where we come in as the public, is to just, to make sure that they do follow through, because I don't think any police officer wants to be in the same situation.
And I understand also, even one of the recommendations was related to the 911 call, the 911 dispatchers, because there's some thought that if, again, Riley was the one who called the 911, correct? Is that correct, Tracy? And
yes, correct. And it came up that there was the call itself was too precise. Usually if you're a witness to something, that you'll have a very short description, and even all of the police officers said that it was strange that they had so many details. And in hindsight, because they did call Riley back, and in hindsight, they said they wished that they would have made that connection, and it wasn't anything like that. So maybe for the 911 calls, to not let go of the person who's calling, and, to never get off the phone with them, and to make sure that if they think it's a young person, to, can I call your parents, or, to just do more validation. So, I do believe that the recommendations are going to improve the type of responses that young people who are just having a struggle, having a bad day, because I think we're all a bad day away.
You're listening
from
to
something like this happening.
No, exactly. I want to expand a little bit on that. Listening to Life Unrehearsed, and that's Tracy Wing, the mother of Riley Fairholm, Riley was shot and killed by police on a summer night in 2018. And Tracy, you fought. I mean, it's been so long, 4 years, 5 years now, and there are many listeners. We talked about this prior to traffic, that may have a child or grandchild going through some difficult times, especially post-pandemic or in these pandemic times. Tracy, as a mom, what words of advice can you give to them?
I have a few, but the biggest one is that these children, young people, they really matter, and what they say means something. Whether it's body language, whether, when you see a change, make sure that your child knows that they can trust you with whatever they tell you, that you're not going to overreact. There's a lot of pressure at school. The teachers can't do it all. There's just problems everywhere. So I think we need to be more kind, more compassion, and we need to treat these young people with kindness, being gentle with them, and to validate what they're feeling, because if they're saying it means a lot, and we really need to listen and to take the time and forget the pressure of college and in high school. It's just high school, there's a lot of pressure out there, a lot, and it's a different world.
It absolutely is. We'll call it social media, we'll call it pandemic, whatever it is different. And I know your words are resonating with a lot of parents out there. And like you say, keep the lines of communication open and listen. We have just a couple more minutes. I know you also wanted to bring up, this was a fight for you, Tracy, just to get to this level. And I don't think a lot of our listeners realize when there is a public coroner's inquiry, some of the legal fees that you have to incur, that the government incurs, the taxpayers are paying. Can you give us an idea of that situation?
Yes. So we have to prepare to go to a coroner's inquest. It's really like court. So most of the coroners are lawyers. They have lawyers that are assisting them, and then the police officers also have lawyers representing them, their union, etc. So, of course, I have to as well have a lawyer, because the coroner is not there for Riley or for the family. They're really a neutral party. So a 3 week, it was like 10 days. It cost our family $24,000, and I really got a good deal. And I did make an access of information request, and the police officers involved, up to, as of December 1st, their bill was $167,000.
Unbelievable.
So,
You're talking, first of all, just unimaginable that you've got to dish out $24,000, and yet the government's legal costs are 8 times, almost 7 times, at $167,000 for this. It's and I believe the way our system is set up, can you try to get some of that $24,000 reimbursed, Tracy?
I can. I had to fill out a form and saying why I thought that I needed legal representation, and I could receive up to $20,000 in reimbursement, and the coroner is the one that's going to make that decision.
Let's hope you get that. Tracy, I want to finish this off. The coroner made reference to this long delay in her report, stating, "The death of a child is an unbearable ordeal for parents. It is deplorable that these parents had to wait 4 years to get answers concerning the death of their son. Dare I say, Tracy, without your determination and perseverance to get answers, I'm not sure you would even got any answers." God bless you, Tracy. I want to wish you continued strength and courage, and thank you for coming on to Life Unrehearsed.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure, as always.
All right. Thank you, Tracy. That's Tracy Wing, whose son Riley Fairholm was shot and killed by police on a summer night in 2018. God bless you, Tracy, and we wish you well.